All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're tackling a huge decision point for so many people on their fertility journey, Mini IVF versus conventional IVF. And this is a big one because it's not just about picking a medical procedure, it's about choosing between two totally different philosophies for building a family. At the end of the day, the choice really boils down to this, right? Do you go for the approach that tries to maximize your chances with one single powerful cycle? Or do you choose a gentler, less intense path that, well, it might take a bit longer? There's no single right answer. It completely depends on your body, your goals, and frankly, your priorities. So to really understand this choice, we first have to break down the core strategy behind each one. And just to be clear, we're not talking about slight variations here. These are two fundamentally different ways of thinking about fertility treatment. Okay, first up, the one most people have heard of, conventional IVF. You can think of this as the maximum yield approach. The whole goal is to use daily high-dose medications to get the ovaries to produce as many mature eggs as possible, all in one cycle. It's kind of like casting a really wide net, hoping you'll bring in a huge catch. And on the complete other side of the spectrum, you've got Mini IVF. This is the gentle stimulation approach, which was actually pioneered in Japan. So instead of that giant net, this is more like using a very specialized targeted lure. It uses oral meds like Clomid plus much lower doses of injections to retrieve a smaller, very select group of eggs. The differences really jump out when you see them side by side like this. With Mini IVF, you're looking at maybe 1 to 4 eggs. Compare that to 10 to 20 with a conventional cycle. And here's another key difference, the risk of ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, or OHSS. With Mini IVF, that risk is incredibly low, whereas with conventional treatment, it's something that has to be managed really carefully. Okay, now let's talk about the part that often drives the whole conversation, the numbers. When it comes to IVF, the data on success rates, egg yield, and of course cost is what so many of these decisions hinge on. So the most immediate and obvious difference is the egg yield. With conventional IVF, you're shooting for that big number, 10 to 20 eggs. With Mini IVF, it's typically 1 to 4. And that difference in quantity, well, that's the fundamental trade-off you're making from the get-go. So you might be thinking, okay, but does a gentler approach mean better quality eggs? That's a super common question. But you know what? The current data suggests that the quality is actually pretty similar between both methods. This is a really important point. Mini IVF isn't about getting super eggs. It's about changing the quantity you retrieve. This leads to two very different ways to think about success. Your per-cycle success rate, your shot at a live birth from one single try, is usually higher with conventional IVF. It's just a numbers game. You have more embryos to work with. But then there's cumulative success. That's your chance over multiple cycles. And that's where things can start to look very similar. It really is the classic tortoise and the hare scenario. And of course, we have to talk about the cost. The difference per cycle is, well, it's significant. Mini IVF can be less than half the price of a conventional cycle. And for many people, that alone makes fertility treatment much more accessible. But, and this is a big but, you really have to think about the total cost to get to a pregnancy. If it ends up taking you 3 Mini IVF cycles to get the same result you could have gotten from one conventional cycle, the overall price tag might end up being pretty close. The metric that matters isn't just cost per cycle, it's the total cost per live birth. Okay, enough about the numbers for a minute. Let's get to the human side of all this. What is it actually like to go through these treatments? Because the physical and emotional journey can be just as important as any clinical outcome. Because Mini IVF uses way lower doses of hormones, the day-to-day experience is just milder. We're talking less bloating, fewer intense mood swings, and just an overall less heavy physical burden. If you're someone who is sensitive to hormonal meds, this can be a total game changer. And this brings us to a major safety advantage. OHSS is a potentially serious complication where the ovaries swell up. With Mini IVF, because the stimulation is so mild, the risk of that happening is practically eliminated. This is especially important for patients with conditions like PCOS or those with a high ovarian reserve, because they're the most at risk. Now, it's also important to say that conventional IVF has become so much safer over the years. Modern protocols like using what's called a GnRH agonist trigger have dramatically cut down the risk of severe OHSS. So while the risk is higher than with Mini IVF, it's now a well-managed and pretty low risk for most patients. So we've covered the philosophies, we've looked at the numbers, and we've talked about the experience. Now we get to the most important part. how do you put all this information together to figure out which path might actually be the right fit for you? So let's start with this question. Have you ever been told that you're a poor responder? Are you over 38? Or are you really concerned about the risk of OHSS? If you're nodding along to any of these, your situation has some pretty specific things to consider. And for this group, Mini IV can be a really strong contender. The thinking goes like this. If high-dose medications aren't going to give you more eggs anyway, then why put your body through it? For these patients, Mini IV can offer very similar success rates, but with a much lower physical and financial burden each cycle. Now, on the other hand, what are your goals? Are you hoping to bank embryos for future children, or is doing genetic testing, also known as PGT, a high priority for you and your family? If you answered yes to that, then conventional IVF is often the more efficient path. It's because both embryo banking and genetic testing are, at their core, a numbers game. You simply need a larger pool of embryos to start with to increase your odds of having enough healthy ones to reach your goals. Okay, this right here is your actionable takeaway. Think of this as a checklist of crucial questions to bring to your next doctor's appointment. Ask about your specific ovarian reserve. Talk about your personal risk for OHSS. Compare the cumulative costs and odds for your case. This is how you empower yourself to have a truly informed conversation. And that brings us to our final question, because ultimately the choice between mini and conventional IVF is a deeply personal one. It forces you to ask, is the main goal to get to the destination, a baby, as quickly and efficiently as possible, or is the quality of the journey, the path you take with all its physical and emotional demands, just as important? There's no right answer, only the one that's right for you.